Hello, and welcome to Transtastic Gender Identity to the Ordinary Mortal. My name is Suzanne Rappaport, and I'm a professor in the Occupational Therapy Department at Regis College. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, you can put them into the YouTube chat or email them to inclusiveexcellence@regiscollege.edu. I will now turn it over to MJ Craig. MJ has over a decade of experience in advocacy and education, with the goal of improving the lives of the queer community. He discovered occupational therapy after a previous career in technology and education. Currently, he continues his advocacy work surrounding the issues faced by the transgender and gender nonconforming community, and his distinct background gives him evident expertise in assistive technology. Thank you very much for being here, MJ.
Thank you. It's always a little embarrassing when other people introduce me because it seems a lot like bragging, but thank you. So yeah, this is Transtastic, Gender Identity for the Ordinary Mortals. My name is MJ. I have my email up on that screen. I can also give it to you later, but do feel free to follow up with me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. This is very much an area of emerging expertise, and though I try to stay as far to the ahead of it as possible, you know, I can certainly use some help if you can help me share some of your own best practices if this is an area that you have some experience with. I like to start out with a short video called Raising Ryland. I do have to let you know that I sometimes, I know that I always have feelings at the end of this video. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that though this is overall a positive message, this video has a positive message that at least I always get a little misty in the eyes.
We went to the preschool
for open house,
and all the kids had their self-portraits up. And Ryland made a vest, huh?
A vest, a
and
tie.
And his short hair before he even had short hair, huh? Remember that? You made this when you had long hair, but you knew what you looked like inside your head, huh?
You have chip on your face, dude.
I made it short hair.
Mm-hmm. And was that you trying to tell us something?
And I couldn't.
Why couldn't you? Because you were 3? Mommy and Daddy didn't understand yet, did we?
No.
I wouldn't do anything different. All that I want is to be a good mom.
We don't know a whole lot of people with children as young as Ryland who've gone down this road. Yes, he's just a kid. But he's a kid that feels very strongly about something, and we need to open up our minds and understand that.
Okay. There's your little baby.
Oh my God.
There's a little heart beating. Let's figure out if it's a boy or a girl, so we can start calling it he or she, okay? So if we look right in the middle, it's a little girl.
And I was excited. I was just thrilled. We found out girl, and it was like, boom, everything went pink. Hillary, about to have your baby.
I'm so happy.
We've got grandmas. Push through this last one. Come on, Hill, push through this last one.
8.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. All right, this is Ryland, 11 months, almost. Ryland, hey. Hi. Hi.
We noticed about 12 months of age that Ryland didn't seem to be responding to sounds. Something's going on. Ryland's not hearing certain things. Maybe your toothbrush is still going. We finally just said, you know, we have to get this checked out. We need to do something. We got an official deaf diagnosis, profoundly deaf at 13 months old. We found out about cochlear implants, really did everything we could to research them. Did you get a prescription?
Down, so it's got a little more slack. That way she can turn her head easier.
Can you hear it?
I like to shut it off too so that they recognize themselves.
Speak. Okay, give it to him. Okay.
A shoe. Is that a big shoe? No, that shoe is Mom.
Who's home, Rylan? Do you hear somebody?
Our goal was mainstream by kindergarten, and we were able to get Rylan mainstream well before that. At preschool age, Rylan had all but caught up. At this point, can communicate just like any other normal kindergartner.
Hearing is the non-issue at this point.
Yeah.
This is my sister, Vivian, and I know brother, Robin.
When he got sound, as soon as he got any understanding of communication, he started saying immediately, I am a boy. We would kind of laugh a little bit about it, and Jeff would say, oh, you're a girl. I'm a boy. And he would just get so mad.
You could get Rylan to put on a dress, but it was just torturous. It was like an all-out war.
I was trying to tell my mom and dad. I couldn't talk, and I was just making noises. And I was just trying to tell them.
It was hell every single day. Every single day he got ready for school. Every single day. It was like painful for him to be seen as a girl.
Oh, wow. Rylan, is that the Buzz Lightyear laser?
She likes guns and stuff.
I know, right?
Little tomboy.
Yep.
I got better about buying gender-neutral clothes. He just had long hair and bows. He hated it. I mean, we asked him. He hated it. But he wanted to make us happy. And so he just did it.
Gender is between the ears. It's in your brain. Sex is anatomy. It's between your legs. And they're two very different things. In really simple terms, being transgender is having the body of one gender and the brain or the mind or the spirit of the opposite gender.
You were really diving in and researching it, and I didn't want to hear it. The pain that I know he's going to experience, in addition to the pain I know he's going to experience just being a deaf child with cochlear implants, I couldn't even fathom Rylan living that life.
I don't feel like I'm a confrontational person, but when it comes to my kids, like, I will attack.
Oh, I know. I've seen that. What we're going through is a struggle. It's just not something that you would ever wish upon your child. There's no forcing these children to feel differently than they feel. The only thing you force them to do is go hurt themselves and potentially kill themselves. And that's not going to be my kid. Those instances we had where he just was, you know, why did God make me like this? And maybe when my family dies, then I can cut my hair and I can be a boy. What 4-year-old says that?
Once he started making the comments about after the family dies and then he's gonna cut his hair, I said, no. Why do you have to wait until we die? You can get your hair cut right now. And then after he got his hair cut, it was like, totally different kid. The smile on his face was bigger than I'd ever seen. look at your hair. That's how you always have it sticking up in the front like that, spiky.
Transition at the age of 4 or 5 does not have any medical interventions whatsoever, including surgery. It simply involves social transition. So others changing pronouns for the child, sometimes changing the way someone wears their hair or how they dress, and sometimes changing name.
41% of transgender people attempt to commit suicide. 41%.
Do I want a living son or a dead daughter? I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. So that's where I get pissed. And that's where I say people can go screw themselves. They can try living with that stat.
It's not their kid. They're not forced to face it. So they can sit back and make judgments all day long.
Dear friends and family, this is an incredibly difficult letter to write. As parents of a transgender child, it's frightening to know that there is only so much we can do to protect Ryland from a sometimes harsh and demonizing world. What we do know, however, is that living in secrecy and shame is not good for any of us. Jeff and I will be the first to admit that we struggle with it sometimes, not because we are ashamed of him in any way, but because it makes us worry for his safety. We just want our home and our friends and family's homes to be his safe places where he can be himself. You also must know that if you choose not to support our decision, and this is in bold print, please don't expect our relationship to grow from here. Our child's happiness is most important to us.
He was at a preschool close in the area and transitioned before he started kindergarten. So I have only known Ryland as a boy.
I knew that I had to get those teachers educated because there are kids around here that know, and they're bullies. I just knew that I needed to have a whole army of teachers protecting Ryland at all times.
One of my responsibilities as an educator is to make a safe classroom environment for all of my students. They're going to be in a learning environment where they are respected.
Did you have any problems using the boys' bathroom today?
No. Are you playing in my freezer? Can you please not?
Jump out of the freezer. No, there were no problems?
No.
Good. Good. Everything worked out okay?
Yeah.
All your friends were good? I heard Mrs. Dodds had you stand up and say something about your ears.
Yeah.
Was that good?
Yeah.
That way no one had to ask any questions after that, huh?
Yes, but they still did.
Oh, yeah? But that's okay, right? Did you answer their questions for them?
Yes.
And I always say, we're teaching them reading and we're teaching them writing and we're teaching them mathematics, but we're teaching them to be good people. Thank goodness that this little boy now gets to live as his true self.
What else do you want the world to know about you, Ryland?
That it's cool that I have two kind of things. My co-parent implants them, and I'm transgender.
I just want my kid to feel loved just like anyone else, you know.
If I have to keep Ryland in a bubble for the rest of his life where he's happy here, then I'll do that. You can only do what you can do and hope that people will open their mind.
So there's a couple of things that I really like about that. Oh, excuse me. I'm sharing the wrong screen. There's a couple of things that I like about that video in particular. But one thing that I do want to say at the start is that I am not a representative. I can't pretend to be a representative of the deaf community. I know that cochlear implants for many people are, there's like negative, very strong and negative, positive and negative associations with cochlear implants. And I think that in the context of this presentation, what's most interesting to me actually is how on top of his diagnosis, Ryland's diagnosis of profound deafness, how on top of that his family was, and how much harder it was for them to deal with his gender identity. I think the other thing that strikes a lot of people is the 41% statistic. I will tell you that there is tremendous mental health issues in the transgender community. I'm not sure if it's something you haven't grown up experiencing. I'm not sure how you would be able to understand this. Maybe there are analogous situations. I'm not sure, but gender is the single most societally important marker that we receive. It is the first thing that people ask about babies. You know, we saw in the video, they had the footage of before Ryland was even born. You know, they talked about, you know, they saw Ryland's anatomy and they said, his dad said, and everything went pink. It is fundamental to how the world sees us and how the world treats us. I myself am transgender. I was assigned the female gender at birth and always felt like something was off. And it took me a long time to figure that out. I started really figuring it out cognitively, being able to put like words to it much later than Ryland. I was in 5th grade. But I can tell you that the realization of what might make me different from other people caused 2 sort of immediate reactions. And the first one was this great weight coming off of my shoulders because I finally might understand why I felt so different, why things didn't feel right. And the second realization was that I was going to be alone for the rest of my life. I had internalized at that age the idea that that this was something about myself that I was going to have to hide, or that when people found out, they would be appalled by. And so even as an adult, it is hard for me to let other people fully in and to let myself be truly loved, because I grew up for a very long time thinking that if people really knew who I was, their attitudes about me would change. And I think that explains why 41% of my population of people who identify as transgender, gender nonconforming, attempt to commit suicide. And you have to keep in mind that statistic only counts the people who were not able, who did not actually kill themselves, because of course there are people who did end their own lives, and they obviously could not participate in that survey. So I think the statistic is actually even higher, which boggles my mind. Every trans person I know that does any kind of advocacy work, there is one reason we do it, and it is because it is because of the mental health. It is for the mental health of the next generation of trans people. It is our #1 concern. I don't generally like to talk for an entire population, but there, I just did. All the trans people I know who do trans advocacy, that is their primary reason. So there might be some terminology that came up or some ideas that came up in that video that might be new. So let's get kicking, and we can, with some terminology. All right, so sex assigned at birth, sorry, nope. Sex assigned at birth is based on the appearance of genitals, right? That's the moment when the doctor typed, "It's a girl." It's the moment when Rafiki holds Simba up in front of everybody and, "It's a boy." Gender identity is in your head. Gender expression might be your clothing, your haircut. Obviously, haircut was really important to Ryland and how they identified. Sexual orientation, on the other hand, is who you're attracted to. Transgender is an umbrella term that many people use when their gender identity doesn't match their sex assigned at birth. And transsexual is an older, more binary term, binary meaning that there are only two genders, male or female, and that you have crossed from one to the other. It actually fairly accurately describes my own experience, but there's a lot of negativity associated with that term. And I actually don't think that gender is a construct and there aren't just two, so avoid. Cisgendered is when your gender and sex assigned at birth. So most of the people in this or witnessing this presentation are probably cisgendered, even if you didn't know what that meant. That's sort of the definition of privilege, that you don't know that there's a word to define what your identity is, because your identity is so mainstreamed that it doesn't need to be explained. Gender nonconforming, GNC, is a non-binary term. Cross-dresser refers to someone who is cisgendered, so their sex assigned at birth matches their gender identity. And they have an unexpected gender expression, right? Clothing, haircut, makeup, nails. Transvestite might be an old word for that. Again, avoid. Queer, this is a larger umbrella term for the LGBTQAI community, and of course used to be a slang, but a lot of people feel it has been reclaimed now, especially younger people. Intersex is when someone is born with reproductive parts that don't fit societal's expectations. About 1 in 1,000 people is born intersex, and there's a movement within the community to move away from having genital reconstructive surgery as soon as the person is born. And actually, if there's no physiological problem with that person eliminating urine, then wait until this person is old enough to make any decisions about their body and see if they want to make any, because if they're able to live, then maybe there isn't a problem, even if they don't match what society might expect. Androgynous has to do with gender identity. So this is having no gender or more than one gender. Gender dysphoria is the DSM's term for what I call the struggle. I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I think I have an unusual life trajectory, but I recognize that to receive insurance to help pay for my medications, I take testosterone, I need a diagnosis. That's how our industry works. So I have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. An ally is something that people in the audience can choose to become, or maybe already are. That's somebody who's an upstander rather than being a bystander for an oppressed community. I know that I strive to be an ally to marginalized communities. And I hope that people join me in being allies for the trans and gender nonconforming community. I'm a little distracted. The only advantage of doing these kinds of presentations at home is that I get to do them with my dog, who, if we have time during questions, maybe I can show you, because he's real stinking cute. Okay, pronouns. You've heard of Merriam-Webster. They have been used consistently since the 1300s. Sometimes people want to say that they is not a singular pronoun. If somebody tries to give you that guff, tell them to look it up in the dictionary. The gender unicorn, this is a visual representation of what I was just trying to explain. So you see the little unicorn. Gender identity is your mind, how you understand yourself. Gender expression is your clothing. That's why the green, the bubbles on the side of the unicorn are over their body. Who you're physically attracted to and emotionally attracted to are in your heart. And then sex assigned at birth, that's your parts. Gender spectrum is the idea that gender is a flexible thing without clear boundaries. I know that my mom has a gender expression that goes from very feminine, especially when she's dressing up for a formal event. She wears very classically feminine clothing, but when she's in the basement and she's staining wood, she tends to have a more masculine gender expression, and she feels totally comfortable with that, and it doesn't have anything to do with her identity as a woman. The transition myth is also the idea that starts on a certain day and ends on a certain day and is something in the past. That is not true for everybody in the transgender and GNC community. And so try to be careful. I think it's a good idea to be careful and make sure that you're not sort of sticking people into a box. People do often ask me when I transitioned, and that's actually kind of a long question because socially I started to transition much earlier than I have had some. I took hormones, and I've also had surgery. So those are all parts of transition. I continue to learn new things about how I'm interested in expressing my gender today, you know, many years after I took some of those more obvious steps. So it isn't a moment in time. It's just kind of my life. I'm going to be trans for my whole life. So being transgender means that you face some structural barriers that are pretty specific to our community, although it can be shared with other communities. 57% of trans people experience rejection from their birth families. This can lead to a lot of homelessness. 20%, right? That's 1 out of every 5. Think of 5 people you know. That's one of them. Experience homelessness. And unfortunately, shelters, and I do understand why this is done, but it really backfires for my community. Shelters are often gendered, or once you enter the shelter, the sleeping quarters are gendered and the bathrooms are gendered and that sort of thing. So 55% of homeless trans and GNC people are harassed by shelter staff and residents. Almost 30% are straight up turned away, and 22% are sexually assaulted. I want to talk about intersectionality for a moment. I am a white trans man, and there are privileges that even, you know, there are structural barriers that I face, and I also have privilege being a white man. Murder as a result of your gender identity and expression is one of the most serious, obviously, crimes that, most serious types of violence the trans community faces. And I will tell you right here, right now, trans women of color are disproportionately, astoundingly heavily targeted for violence and even murder. 84% of the trans people murdered in 2017 were people of color, and 80% were women. That is another pretty horrifying statistic, and another reason that I continue to advocate for the trans community. There's significant income differences for trans people. You can imagine, maybe you are or have been homeless. Maybe that means it was difficult for you to finish your education. So 15% of trans people live on less than $10,000 annually. And it just kind of continues throughout, that we are disproportionately making less money. We are twice as likely to be unemployed 4 times if we are a trans person of color. When we're unemployed, we're twice as likely to join the underground economy. And we are 85% more likely to be incarcerated. That is also a horrifying statistic. And I can tell you right now that it feels like a damned if I do, damned if I don't sometimes to have my driver's license say male. So there's a safety in that because my gender presentation, expression, and my gender identity are male. So to have my paperwork match is great, but it also means that if I protested and got arrested, I might be put in a men's jail. And I think I would be, I'm sure I would be scared no matter what, but being a transgender person in a men's prison, I can tell you I would be more scared. I am an occupational therapist, and health inequalities are a huge issue that the trans community faces, and also an area of interest for me. Specifically, health disparities are preventable differences in the burden of disease, injury, violence, or opportunities to achieve optimal health that are experienced by socially disadvantaged populations. So here we have the 41% statistic. 28% of trans people avoid medical care due to discrimination. And 5%, that includes 5% in Massachusetts. I think Massachusetts is an incredible safe haven. I know trans people who moved to Massachusetts not knowing a single person, but moved here because they were unable to live safely, to be employed in the state that they were born in. And so they moved to Massachusetts because they thought they would have a better chance here. And generally they do, but 5% of the trans community in Massachusetts still are refused care because of their gender identity. And that number is 19% overall. So that's about, again, 1 in 5. 29% of trans people in Massachusetts and 15% nationally report having to teach medical providers about transgender care. I am a medical provider as an occupational therapist, and I don't want to, so I feel pretty comfortable in the medical world. I think I'm less susceptible to white coat syndrome, and I don't want to be teaching my doctors and my nurses how to work with me, how to work with my body. I will do a small amount of explanation of my background and how I see myself and what terms I use for my body, but I don't want to be giving my nurse practitioner journal articles just to be able to treat me. So that's kind of scary. And 1 in 4 trans people misuse alcohol and or drugs specifically to cope with the discrimination that they face. So again, that's 25%. And you can imagine that in of itself leads to a whole host of other problems. I do want to, for a moment, touch on another area of intersectionality, trans gender identity and disability. They're obviously not mutually exclusive. Ryland is an example of that. As was the case for Ryland, is the case for other people, that gender identity comes second to the family, but gender identity very much came first for Ryland. Communication ends up being key. So if you're in a position to help someone be able to communicate their own identity, either through listening or helping them find the method of communication that is best for them. So there's visual communication, that's a haircut. If someone has trouble with some of the terminology I've gone over today, there are other ways of explaining those same concepts. But being able to express yourself is the first step to being understood. As Ryland's parents expressed, and as I can tell you from my own experience, it is very hard for friends and then family, if they're still in the picture, of transgender individuals. Sometimes it can be a mental health issue for them. And there's also a real issue of caregiver burnout that needs to be addressed. So I think it's great to support someone who is exploring their gender identity, but I think it is also great to support their support system. That is another way of supporting them. Mahadi Lynn describes herself as both disabled and transgender. She said, there are many parallels between transgender and disabled bodies, and disabled experience. Our bodies are medicalized and modeled as deviations from an ideal body, a platonic ideal, idealized body, a platonic ideal, able or cisgendered existence. And the further we deviate from that ideal, the less acceptable we are in society. Politics, no matter whether you want to talk about politics or not, politics affects how people in the trans community view themselves and their safety. Almost half of LGBTQ youth said they've taken steps to hide who they are since the 2016 election. The FBI in 2017 said that there was an increase in hate crimes in 2016, including those that are bias motivated against people or as a result of someone's gender identity and sexual orientation. COVID-19 impacts everybody, right? But it impacts everybody differently. So guess it shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but people who are more likely to be marginally employed were like the trans and gender non-conforming community were the first, in some cases, to be let go. So in April, 23% of people had their work hours reduced. It was 54% for trans people. 7% of the general population took unpaid leave. Almost 30% of the trans population did, and we are more likely to work in high exposure industries, less likely to have insurance, and more likely to have respiratory risk factors such as asthma and smoking. So I don't know about you, but I am ready for some transgender happy facts. And I do have a few. While only 7% of the general population returns to school after dropping out, 22% of trans and gender nonconforming people return to school, which is awesome. Because I do believe that your level of education can change your work opportunities and your ability to be financially and therefore have better health outcomes. I also think it highlights that a lot of the reasons that people left school in the first place had to do with their gender identity. After transitioning at work, harassment continues for many people if they stay in the same workplace or sometimes even if they move, but 78% reported feeling more comfortable anyways. That seems like kind of a mixed sentiment, but honestly, it tells me that even if nothing about your environment has changed, except for the fact that you said, this is who I am, you are better off. That does not mean 100% of the time, but at least 78% of people said they felt more comfortable anyways, just because they were able to stand there and say, this is authentically who I am. Laverne Cox by herself, to me, feels like a transgender happy fact. I always worry when I like put someone on a pedestal, like I tend to do with her, that I'm gonna find out like tomorrow that like she eats puppies for breakfast or something. But I will tell you that she has faced some very insensitive and offensive questioning in her life on camera, as well as I'm sure in her personal life, but on camera. And she handles it with such grace. She is incredible at answering the question that she wants to answer while still addressing the question that the person asked. So she will say, you know, that's actually not a question I'm comfortable feeling. Sorry, that's not a question I really feel comfortable answering. Here's why. Here's what I will tell you. So if you want to see grace under pressure, Google Laverne Cox. She's had a couple of different interviews. Barbara Walters has even another sort of, you know, Barbara Walters has said some pretty clueless things. But like I said, she's an excellent example of how people can answer those kinds of questions and field those kinds of questions. And if you yourself want to learn more, that's a great way to educate yourself. Another happy fact is the existence of places like Camp Aranudik. Camp Aranudik is a camp for transgender and gender nonconforming youth. It is not a camp where we get together every day and it's like, all right, now we're going to bead about our gender identity and now we're going to canoe about our gender identity. Nope, it is normal camp for kids who want to be normal. Obviously, the kids might talk about their gender identity. Sometimes it comes up. People are much more flexible with their gender expression at camp, including myself, than anywhere else. Because I know that the people there, I know that I'm safe. It is the only time in my life I have volunteered there. I was too old to go there by the time it existed. It is the only time in my life where I've been in an environment where the majority of people in the room were transgender, gender nonconforming, and where I knew that I would really be in a safe space. And it is not a feeling, it is not something I knew I needed or that knew that I wanted. And then once I got it, I never wanted to let it go. There are campers who go there who the only time they are able to be their authentic gender, where people use the name that this child feels is appropriate, the pronouns that are appropriate for the child, that they can dress and do their hair and their nails the way that is appropriate, is for the weekend that they're at camp or the 1 or 2 or 3 weeks that they're at camp. So the fact that that camp exists in of itself is a happy fact for me. So you are all ordinary mortals doing your ordinary mortal things. What can you do to be the change? What to do when someone comes out to you? This is actually one of my favorite questions because it is so simple, and it is actually, in my humble opinion, a really useful piece of information to have in the first place. So when I don't know what I want someone to say, when someone comes out to you, I'll tell you the 2 best answers I got. The second best one was, thanks for telling me. And to be totally honest, whenever somebody tells me something and I'm not sure what to say, I pretty much fall back on thanks for telling me. So a couple of weeks ago, I was jogging with my jogging buddy, and she told me about her mom's struggle with mental illness and how that impacted her as a child. And I was out of breath because she's a much faster runner than I am, but also I was listening to what she was saying so intently that when she stopped talking, I didn't know what to say in that moment, but I knew that I wanted her to know that I had been listening and I had been paying attention. And so what I said was, thanks for telling me. And one, that is a totally true statement. I was very honored that she felt like she could tell me that. And also it gave me a couple of seconds to, get my breath back and think about what I wanted to say next. So if somebody comes out to you, you can say, thanks for telling me. I will give you an example and I'll offer you the opportunity to say, thanks for telling me. Hi, my name is MJ and I'm transgender. Thanks for telling me. Oh, yes. This part works a little better in person, but I hope that you can practice saying that, because it feels a little weird the first couple times, but it'll start creeping into your vocabulary. So the best answer I ever got when I came out to someone was that someone said, awesome. So I actually think it's great if you pair those 2 things. And so I, for example, could come out to you and you could say, awesome, thanks for telling me. So, hi, my name is MJ. I'm trans. Awesome, thanks for telling me. Those are pretty great words. I have come out in a lot of different scenarios to one person or to probably 100 people at the most. And I'm always a little nervous. Even now, even remotely, I always feel a little nervous. I just spent a lot of time thinking that wasn't an okay thing to be. So in those scenarios where I was telling someone who I was very close to and I was feeling really vulnerable, the first thing they said didn't have to be perfect, but it would be really great if the first thing they say is obviously supportive, because then I can just stop freaking out quite so much. So I think awesome, thanks for telling me is a great way to let somebody know it's okay that they came out to you. I think it's also a good idea to, in general, for most people, you know, maybe siblings or best friends or your parents, ask only what you kind of need to know. And then if you have more questions, Google it. One of my friends who is cisgendered and is the most amazing ally, over the 15 years of our friendship, she has asked me questions about being transgender or has asked for my perspective on something as a trans person. She recently wrote an email to, sorry, she's getting her PhD, she's in graduate school. She recently wrote an email to one of her professors because of a concern she had about the way the professor dealt with something regarding gender. And she asked me if I would read the email first. And those were all fine for me, in part because the questions she was asking, the way that she was reflecting on things showed me that she had done her own research, and that she wasn't just asking me because she was curious about this really easy and obvious thing, and that I had to expend my personal energy to educate her, because of course we all only have a certain amount of personal energy. If you do make a mistake, for example, you call someone by a name that they used to know. Sorry, you call them by a name that they used to go by, or you use incorrect pronouns. I would say recognize the mistake, say sorry, and then just move on. I've had a lot of people botch my pronouns or use an old name or something like that. And the longer the apology is, the more embarrassed I am. I don't want to feel embarrassed. I didn't do anything wrong. It's okay, I think, to make these kinds of mistakes. We're human. I know that I have misgendered people in my lifetime. And I do feel bad about it. And I also know that the more I sort of drag it out and apologize and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I've been trying so hard. The more I turn it into a thing, the more it is a thing. They're just like, oh, whoops, I am sorry about that. I'm working on it. And then use the correct name or pronoun. Out yourself as an ally. Like, let's get some rainbow stickers. This is the name badge of somebody I know. They work at Cambridge Health Alliance, if you know where that is, in the greater Boston area. And their name badge is tiny. They work in a medical setting, so they have to wear their name badge all the time. Their name badge is tiny, but they took a 1 inch by like ½ an inch section and dedicated it to saying that they were an ally. And then later on, they got the little ribbon, which is probably a little more obvious and a little less hacked. But they both work. Avoiding gendered terms such as ladies, asking for pronouns, telling people yours in the signature of my email. And as soon as I figure out how to do it in the name on my Zoom, I put my pronouns. And if you aren't sure of someone's pronouns and can't find out for some reason, you can just say their name a lot. MJ this, MJ that, MJ, 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 MJ. I think it's great if your workplace can offer single occupancy bathrooms. And this is important, probably in some ways more important, but too often overlooked, including gender identity in your non-discrimination policy. So this is the occupational therapy non-discrimination policy, and on like line 7 or maybe line 22, it's been a while since I actually read this, they include gender identity. And I made sure of that before I became an occupational therapist. When I was applying to graduate school to get my OT degree, I looked at the non-discrimination statements for all of the schools that I applied to, because much like with my health providers, I wanted to be in an environment where I felt like I might be safe. You can put a rainbow sticker on yourself. You can also put a rainbow sticker on the wall. I say hire me, don't actually hire me to come and do a presentation or invite me to come and do a presentation, but do consider inviting a transgender or gender nonconforming person to come and do a presentation like this at your workplace, your school, your house. We can now Zoom everywhere, your family reunion, the summer camp you work at, anywhere where there are people. There are transgender people, gender nonconforming people. So we need to educate every environment. I also think it's crucial for people to have a clear way to report discrimination and actually make sure that people know it. Discrimination of any kind is way under underreported. And that's, I think, because it isn't always obvious how to do it. In addition to the fact that it takes a certain amount of courage, even if it's anonymous, make sure that people, it's not always easy to find. You have to go to a website. There's like a form. The form asks for your email address. That's not anonymous. We are not going to get better as a society until we can learn the mistakes that we're making. And if we don't invite people to anonymously give us feedback, we're never going to find out what all of those things that we can address are. Especially if you, I know Regis has a huge population in the health field, especially if you're going to be working in a health field. There is, no matter how warm and friendly and open you are as a provider, you and your clients are not going to be on the same level of education in terms of, hopefully anyways, whatever they're coming, you know, they break their arm. Hopefully you as a health provider should know more about a broken arm than they do. So there's always going to be that element there. So there needs to be an anonymous way for people to report when they feel that something has made them unsafe. I have 5 minutes left in my presentation. I do want to give a thanks to the Greater Boston PFLAG. That's parents, and that used to stand for parents and friends of the lesbian and gay people, but it also includes trans individuals. And I know that when I came out to my mother, which I knew was going to be a very difficult thing, I suggested PFLAG as a resource for her, to support her, because caregivers need support too. The Wellesley Education Fund and Tufts Department for Occupational Therapy all helped me develop this presentation, which I have adapted for Regis. I do want to take a second and just point out this flag. So in 2016, for the first time, the transgender flag, that is the transgender flag, was raised outside of City Hall in the city of Boston, and I actually went to go see it, and I can't tell you how surreal that felt, because it was such an obvious, unavoidable sign of my identity, and I didn't, you know, I'm not that old, but I kind of didn't expect to see the day. I had never even seen that flag on a flagpole before, because I saw it in pride parades, I saw it dangling out of people's windows, but I never actually saw it on a flagpole before next to the American flag, which acknowledges that I deserve the same rights as every other American. And I knew that, but it's a pretty powerful moment to have that recognized by the government, which governs you and which creates the laws under which I live. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take a moment for questions. I think Audrey has been monitoring the questions at this point.
Yes, I have some questions that I have received.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hello. I just wanted to, I guess one is a statement, is just to discuss or acknowledge how harmful gender reveal parties can be. As you noted in the video, how that, like, everything turned pink. And then my one question is, earlier in your presentation, you talked about social versus medical transition. Could you delve into those two things a little bit more?
Sure. Broadly speaking, social, sorry, I will explain why I'm smiling in a minute. So a social transition might be more the kind of things that Ryland and his family were pursuing. So this includes possibly going by a different name, maybe changing your gender expression, haircuts, clothing, nail polish, that sort of thing. A medical transition might include hormones, surgeries, anything like that. I don't think it's, you know, I talked about that as ways of sort of marking the different ways that the world, that I enacted my authentic self. And and for the world to better understand me. But again, this is not a clear cut, this is always medical and this is always social. They're just sort of broader terms that I use to explain different ways that I had, different things that I did to ensure that people saw me as I understand myself to be. Gender reveal parties do not make any sense to me fundamentally. I think even if I was a cisgender person, because it's weird to throw a party about your baby's genitals. I don't know a lot. I do think it supports the idea that there's only two kinds of people in the world. I don't know. I don't think we need an excuse to have a party. You're having a baby. Eat cupcakes with pink and blue or purple. I don't care, in the middle. And I was smiling earlier because Audrey just popped up in the comments and I had heard about this, that a gender reveal party in California in 2020 included fireworks, which started a fire in California. So sometimes they also burn your house down. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's definitely not fun. What are some strategies for being an ally?
Right. I think I gave some good examples in my presentation under the guise of sort of like best practices, but I do think a great way to start is attending a presentation like this. I think you can add some rainbows to either your wardrobe or your work ID or your volunteer badge. That doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect, but I think it does signal that you're trying. I think that putting like a little, this is a safe space rainbow sticker on your office door, on your dorm room door, indicates a promise to always get better, to strive to be better. I know it is 5 o'clock and that we're going to move into our panel. Suzanne, should I answer any more questions before we do that, or?
No, we can move on to the panel. I have, more supportive questions, but maybe our panel will answer them.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for this invite. I appreciate it.
Oh, Ovid, you told me you got a haircut. That is so
Yes,
good.
I did.
Oh, man.
I'm going to turn this light behind me real quick.
Sure. So I'll let them introduce themselves, but suffice it to say that Kelly and Ovid are two people actually that I met because we were all counselors at Camp Aeronautic at the same time. And they were just such fabulously wonderful people that I couldn't let them go. And now I have invited them, gently coerced them into being a part of this panel. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I just wanted to thank them for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the invite. This is a unique opportunity to get to speak to people that are going into the medical profession or to the healthcare profession. That's important. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So did you say there were some questions that you want to ask? And I mean, I'm more than happy to do that, or I'm more than happy to tell a little bit of my story.
Yeah, could we start with just a brief intro?
Sure. So my name is Kelly Jenkins. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm originally from East Tennessee. I'm a transgender woman who transitioned roughly around 15 years ago permanently. I am one of those unique people that really battled through life with convincing the world that my gender identity was valid. And several times they convinced me in society that who I thought I was not real. So then I've actually detransitioned a couple of times. So I transitioned I was born male, transitioned in 1995 for close to a year, and society became so difficult for me. Healthcare became so unattainable that I detransitioned, and this was in East Tennessee. And then in 2005, I moved here to Massachusetts, And I've never looked back. 2014, I moved here. 2005, I transitioned. And I'm an educator. I teach middle school science. I am a very out and open and authentic trans woman. And when I'm teaching, this is what my students see in the background. I don't know if you can tell over my shoulder. And it has actually brought up communications with a student of mine that came out because they saw that flag. So I am now a out and proud transgender woman who teaches middle school.
There are many fun facts that I would want to share about Kelly, but two of them are, one, that she has won actual money playing golf, disc golf, because she is a nationally ranked disc golfer. And the other one is that she has a television show. So you can learn way more about the trans and GNC community if you check out Kelly's quest. I know she's too proud to pump it on her own, but
well, thank you.
Her episodes are uploaded to YouTube after they air, so you can see every episode of Kelly's Class. Binge worthy.
And Ovid is one of our guests.
Yes.
Yes. That's such a great segue. Hello, everyone. My name is not A, but I was fighting with Zoom about how to change my name and pronouns on the website, and I couldn't figure it out. So I guess they just figured out for me that I should be called A, but that is not accurate. My name is Ovid. My pronouns that I use are they, them, their, and I also use the word love as a pronoun. I am located on Lenape-Hoking land, and I like to introduce myself with my creation myth. So here it is. Once upon the universe, there lived the purest form of love. Within that love, there were many worlds filled with energy and what is often understood as light. One of the worlds, Earth, started out okay enough, but it was full of humans and their free will. Many of the humans lived with a terrible sickness called fear, yet they kept on growing in number. The more humans there were, the more they needed to spread out. And so the humans began forming tiny groups of themselves and got away from each other. There was so much sickness in all the lands, and many people forgot themselves, forgot they were made of love, and they got carried away. So carried away that humanity began to require reinforcements, agents of love. Our mission for hundreds of years has been to come to this world and remind folks of love. Some of these agents of love are also shapeshifters, although technically all beings have shape-shifting powers. All love is innately shape-shifting and fluid. And so, as the world continued to be a hot mess, it became my turn to get born. So I conspired with the universe and particles of love began to gather. And when I had accumulated enough stable energy, I began to move into the embodiment phase. First, I chose a heart, which had already been beating. Then I chose a brain to hold my mind in. They were not exactly the same pace, but so it was. Being a shapeshifter, I knew I needed to be grounded in this world. So to help me remember, I chose a body, brown as the life-giving earth which holds us. I also understood that younger folks, whom I work with, often know love best. Therefore, I chose a small brown body so I would not tower over them. Shapeshifters often do not rely on physical vision, so I just grabbed any old pair of eyeballs. And then there were so many genders available that I just grabbed as many as I could carry on my way here to this world, Earth. And that is how and why I, Ovid, was truly born. So I like to introduce myself that way because I got a little bored of introducing myself in other ways. And I feel like this makes sense for my life because a lot of folks, when people think about transgender people, think first about our bodies. And I'm over that. So that's why this story, this way of introducing myself just happened. I'm on the way to a speech one day. And other things about myself, I tend to use whatever language makes best sense in a moment, and often use and allowed to be used oversimplified explanations in order to navigate a binary world and binary systems. But I'm not a big fan of binaries. And I'm also a neurodivergent person, as many trans people are. I think that's enough.
So I also have many fun facts about Ovid, but I think the two that I'm going to choose for now is that they are a puppeteer and make wonderful puppets. And also Ovid has taught a trans and GNC inclusive sex education, which is like, I didn't even know how much we needed that until they told me they did that. And I was just like, oh my God. So I'll stop trying to freak out about how awesome these people are. And I think we can answer some questions.
Okay. One of the questions I got is it inappropriate to use they to refer to a person whose pronouns you don't know?
As a person who is a they, some people, I hear from some people that it's not okay, but I think that's particularly for situations where someone is saying, my pronouns are she, and they're repeating it over and over and over again. And then someone's calling them they. So then that would feel like mispronouncing. But then also there's generally in the English language, when someone does not know what a person's gender or what their pronouns are, we're like, who was that person? I don't know. Where did they go? So I don't think it's inappropriate. Good question. It's always, I think I heard MJ saying it's good to ask.
I'm not non-binary, but I try really hard, and there's lots of new concepts that as I mature and grow older in life that I'm learning and wanting to learn more about. And one of the things that I know about my students that I work with is they want you to know who they are as they are. And if you don't know a person's pronouns and you're just generally talking, I think Ovid explained it perfectly. I think they is totally appropriate. But if a student of mine says, my name is such and such, and I use he, him pronouns, then at that point, you should respect that this person is using he, him pronouns and not using they. But if you don't know in a general situation, I think that it would be fine. And with my students, I will do it occasionally because I am unaware of their pronouns and that hasn't been mentioned yet. And I don't want to make any assumptions if I can. And I know that by using they, that I'm still kind of making assumptions. So I don't think it ever comes from a place of hurt. If you're just trying to be respectful to the person and you're like, I don't understand your pronouns, so I don't know what they are, so I will use they.
Okay, thank you. Another question I've gotten from the chat is, where can we research proper terminology? Because language changes so rapidly. How do we know that we're using terms that are still the right terms in 5 or 10 years? Which also brings me to a second, kind of fits into with the second question I got about using, where did the question go? The recent push to use gender diverse and not gender non-conforming, because that's more inclusive.
I think in general, it's a good idea to look up sources on the internet that are written by gender diverse individuals and organizations. I'm totally blanking on what some of those might be right now, despite the fact that I obviously have a bunch of them because they are the resources for my presentation. Oh, the National Center for Transgender Equality, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, Fenway Health.
I like using PFLAG also because they have a lot of youth and parents in there. And I find that a lot of youth are driving this language change. We have a GSA in the middle school, and I'm sitting around watching seventh graders own their own identities, and they're like, wait, this is who I am. And you can watch the language evolve right there in middle school GSA. So I think that just Googling and PFLAG and just always researching, because language is always evolving. I think that was a beautiful point that the person made in their question.
Yeah, I was going to say, wherever the young folks are hanging out on the internet, Reddit or Tumblr or wherever is where you're going to find some of the most accurate information for that age group in some cultures. And I also think that, yeah, it's sometimes like by the time someone writes up a book and goes through the process, by the time it's published, the stuff that's in it is out of date a little bit. But also there is, I find that there's different there's different terms that are used. Some terms I feel like come from a academic, like college and beyond, I don't know, textbook or discussion or discourse or whatever the words are. And then some language is developed by parents or guardians of children who are not like always particularly sure what that kid's identity is because the kids are so young. So some of the language is big enough to encompass the children in ways that make sense to their grown-ups, I feel like. And then some of the things are also regional. I think even some things, I'm not where you all are located, but some things are different. Some language is different in Massachusetts versus like New York. Like some people say, I'm a person of trans experience. And I feel like that's a lot of people I know from New York say that. So I think it also can be regional.
Okay, another question I got is any suggestions of people to follow on social media or trans awareness? Just, we're wonderful, glorious people.
I've already rhapsodized about Laverne Cox. I'm probably not the best actually at social media. I don't know if either of you feel like they're up to date on not only who are like sort of interesting trans people, but who also have a presence on social media.
Yeah, I in some ways I'm not a social media person, but I also feel like sometimes when you like explore just a little or like find a right hashtag, then you'll be able to find a lot. Like Instagram is a good resource for finding different people, whether they're celebrities or people who are sharing their medical transition stories or journeys. Yeah, they're like, I feel like just look up some hashtags and then you'll be able to find, and suddenly we'll find everyone.
And how I found some people to follow recently is I have fallen in love with the TV show Pose. And it's an amazing show, and all of the trans characters in it are played by trans people. Like, it's LGBTQ oriented, everybody, the whole production, everything is LGBTQ driven. And just watch one episode and then start following those people on social media because they are brilliant. The show has enlightened me, and it's taken me back to my coming out eras when I was in my 20s, back in the late 80s. So I find it, if there's a TV show that has a character that you're interested in, follow them.
Right, and then I guess tangent off that, do you have any personal role models? Besides Laverne Cox?
I mean, right, I was like, how awkward is it if I just keep saying Laverne Cox? I have other role models. Not all of most of my role models are cisgender because most of the people in my life are cisgender. And to be honest, I mean, the other role models I have are people like Kelly and Ovid, trans people I've kind of collected and that I hold close to me along the way. I don't feel like, I mean, there's so many more trans people in the media than there used to be, but I don't feel like I'm like overwhelmed with, you know, famous trans people in the sciences or in the arts or so.
So with me, because of this show, and thank you, MJ, for introducing it earlier, my TV show, Kelly's Quest, the whole premise is called 50 States, 50 Stories. So I want to go around the nation and interview amazing trans people in all 50 states. And every time I meet a new person, I come out with a new role model, because the work that's being done all over this nation by just brilliant, inspiring trans people and our allies, you can't help but see them as role models. I mean, MJ and I worked together at Wellesley Middle School, and he almost instantly became one of my role models, because and that's just how it happens with this, because I think you said it right, MJ. We're so surrounded by cisgender people. I could list a lot of cisgender people that I am in awe of. I think Jackie Robinson, the baseball player, is one of the most amazing human beings that's ever walked this earth, and he is one of my role models. But as far as transgender people go, they're all in my life. Once I find a role model that's trans, I become their friend as quickly as I can.
I just looked up the link to the YouTube page that you have, Kelly, and I'm dropping it in the comments so that maybe it can be, the link to that can be disseminated.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of the trans kids are my role models. The way that I feel like I've been very fortunate, particularly where I live and the experiences that I had, to be able to connect with trans community, whether that's via the internet or in person. But a lot of, I guess, who I shape my life after or for are children, but particularly trans children, because I think a lot of times in trans adult spaces, there's a lot of adultism that's like, oh, we have to help these children, and we have to, like, it was hard for us, and so we have to do this for them. And a lot of people who do that, who don't have relationships with trans children, don't realize that, one, the same things don't always apply medically or physically to a younger group of people, and also don't realize that the younger kids who are doing this, they're like telling people who they are. They're like, this is who I am, and if you don't like it, oh well, we don't have to be friends. And that's like many of the children that I encounter. That's like the essence of how they navigate the world. So, which is not what my experience was at their age. So just, watching them and learning from what they're doing and how they move in the world has been really powerful to me.
All right, thank you. I have one comment that someone wrote. They said, I am a trans alumni of Regis, graduated last spring. Thank you for doing this panel. Thought that was a good one to share.
It is nice.
And then another question. What would you wish your healthcare providers or teachers would have done differently when you were growing up? Or what is something they did well?
I don't particularly want that one to begin with, but I'm going to take it. Healthcare for trans people can be very touchy and very scary at times because, well, there's a lack of knowledge. I mean, you all are thankful. I'm thankful that you all are now providing that knowledge to a group of people, but there's a lot of other healthcare providers that are lacking any type of knowledge on what it means to be transgender. And I think that the two healthcare providers that stick out to me were my very first therapist in Knoxville, Tennessee, very transphobic, homophobic, anti-LGBTQ area that I was raised in. And I had a counselor, a therapist, and a doctor who were willing to risk that environment to treat me and to help me to become my authentic self. So at the time, I didn't really understand the risk that they were kind of putting themselves through just to provide therapy and to provide medicine to me and to provide healthcare to me. And in hindsight, I feel that those two people really saved a lot of lives by being that available to my community in East Tennessee. But then I found a lot of healthcare providers that haven't a clue. I'll give a quick story, a bad story. A friend of mine had had surgery and was having post-surgery complications. So we had to rush to the emergency room. The doctors there misgendered her. So she's in the middle of trauma. We're misgendering her. We're kind of almost, they were like, we don't know how to treat this problem you have. And I'm like, yes, you do. A human being is bleeding. You know how to stop humans from bleeding. Stop acting like you don't know what to do here. And it became very emotional. And going to the ER as a trans person is terrifying. I have had pretty bad experiences if I've had to be rushed to the ER ever. I had the flu once really bad and had to be rushed to the ER. And once they found out that I was trans, my entire healthcare process changed on me. So but now, luckily, I have found a wonderful doctor near me and a wonderful endocrinologist and a wonderful therapist. But it was me taking the work to go find them. It wasn't just something that was easy to accomplish. So I think if healthcare providers could become more available to us, we would go to more healthcare providers.
Yeah, I know MJ touched on some of this earlier, I think, but yeah, navigating those experiences is often very difficult, especially when you're not going to the provider for a gender related reason. And in my young adult years, I had a couple of experiences where I'm going to get there. I'm there for like a refill on medication that has to do with like my brain and my behavior. And the questions that I'm being asked are about sexuality or like sex practices. Like, don't you need to take this test? Or like, I need to prescribe you Gardasil. And that has nothing to do right now with this appointment. That's specifically about this thing. So yeah, I feel like one of the things that I wish that some folks would realize is to kind of work that stuff out before the patient arrives, whether you realize they're trans or not, but just working that out anywhere else besides in the person's appointment, particularly if it's one of those appointments that's like 15 minutes or, however long it needs to be. And also I feel like many ways that we talk about trans folks has to do with pronouns and bathrooms, which is great and enough in some areas, but not. And at medical places, it's where first we have to get there. We have to get through the door. We have to. There might be like a lobby downstairs, receptionist or desk place. And then there might be a place that's in the actual office that where people are managing the charts or whatever. And then there's the person who'll take you back. And then there's the person who's going to treat you. So some of those things, and in my case, my ID and my insurance don't have the same, intentionally don't have the same gender marker. So sometimes I'm going in there. I actually was having an appointment for my wrist, and I was just going to an appointment, and suddenly I was going to have to get X-rays, and I didn't know that was going to happen. So I was at the desk, then put to the X-ray place, and I was led back to the place, and the person says, just have a seat in the female waiting room. And I was already in the room. And I look up and there's a sign that said female waiting room. And I was already in there when, by the time they said that, and then they just walked away. I mean, they were only the person, they were the person who was showing me to the place, but not the person who was working with me there. So I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how other people were perceiving me, which sometimes feels important. So, and I think sometimes people with certain bodies that are protected or given certain kind of exams are ignored when people assume that trans masculine people don't have these body parts, or have no need for these body parts. So thinking about that and like working through all that stuff before the patient comes in is stuff that I wish people could work on.
All right. So Kelly mentioned how she now through diligence has found good doctors. Has anyone had any good experiences? I mean, if not, I can just say there's nowhere to go but up. Nowhere to go but up.
Sadly, I think.
I know I had a good experience. The asterisk being that I deliberately sought out a transgender doctor who transitioned in her 50s and was written up in the Boston Globe. And because of that, I was like, I want her to be my doctor. She was actually the one who told me when the process for getting the gender marker on your passport changed was simplified. So this was probably 8 years ago. But it was a really cool moment to have my healthcare provider tell me like, oh, and if you want, I can write you a note and you can email and include it with your passport application and they will change the marker. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, it's I don't know about you, but I don't get up every morning and research how like new policies for your passport or your social security card, or changing the name on your birth certificate if you were born in X, Y, and Z states. Turns out your name and your gender marker are on every stupid piece of paper. That matters a whole lot. So to have her tell me about that was a really cool moment. It was one of the few moments I've had in healthcare where I felt like somebody who was not specifically addressing my mental health was addressing my mental health. But I mean, that being said, she's a trans doctor. She was obviously very deep in this community because of her own identity. And she knew that I was interested in changing my paperwork. She didn't just walk up to me and, you look like one of those trans men. Let me tell you about passports. So it was a pretty good moment. And of course, because you're in healthcare, because who you're insured by determines who can be your doctor, I no longer have her because I changed health insurance plans when I changed jobs. So I didn't get to keep her.
Is anything from Ovid or Kelly?
When you were talking about you didn't get to keep her in healthcare and everything. So I think here is one promising thing. When I transitioned way back yonder many, many years ago, everything came out of my pocket. There was no insurance for any of it. There was no insurance for hormones. There was no insurance for surgery. There was no insurance for any of it. So I spent a lot of money to save my life. That's how I look at it. I think the health care that I provided to myself by spending all of my money that I had saved my life, because that's the level of what was happening with me. And my doctors, the one I was talking about in Tennessee that was helping me to figure out how to do this, even though they might be getting in trouble for it, they figured out a way to get me estrogen through my insurance company, even though my insurance company technically wouldn't provide me estrogen. So there was these little tricks that they would have to do, and it always made me feel a little taboo. It's like, we have to lie to the insurance company for me to save my life. And that was just for the estrogen. Any other surgical procedures or anything like that were all out of pocket. And now today, I'm actually waiting on a phone call from a hospital. My roommate is having a surgery today. She's a trans woman, and she's having a surgery that her health insurance is covering. So we've gone from me having to pay everything out of my pocket to where she is now having a procedure covered by her health care, and she's complaining because the deductible was too high. And in a way that made me smile, but in a way it also made me think we got a long ways to go still, because the deductible is too high for this life-saving surgery. So I think that that's one thing to keep in mind, like MJ said, is health insurance drives a lot of how far a person can transition. Finances, their desire of whether they want to transition, how they want their gender expression to look, how they want to present to the world. All of those things go into the decision-making process of how you're going to live your life as your authentic self.
I have had, the past couple of years, I've had a lot of medical experiences. I'm very privileged to live in a city where, one, there's an abundance of trans folks, and where people are doing a lot of work for our rights, but it's also a medical hub, I guess. So many of those places have worked on competency a lot. And my primary care place is an LGBT health clinic. So where there are doctors who are also, or providers who are also trans people, although not all of those experiences have been affirming for me. But I think it's still a privilege that there is a lot of competency happening in schools, medical schools, and yeah, I have the X-ray, the waiting room experience threw me off a lot because of all of the places that I've been in recently, and all the times that I've not had such a problem. And in the building where that is, there's so many. I've actually been there for like, I guess there's a bunch of different types of medical things happening. It's just like a huge medical facility, and I never had a big problem in there. And I was surprised that in that place there was that's how they set up the waiting rooms. I'd been going there for like 2 or 2.5 years for various things, and have had other X-rays in other places, and that I was caught off guard because of the positive or neutral and thus affirming experiences that I have had. So in my area, may not be perfect, and I think it's also not perfect for kids, but there's a lot of opportunities for positive experiences.
All right, good, thank you. Now, in closing, before we close out, do you have any particular like motto or mantra or affirmation you want to share with, you know, the internet before we go? So it's kind of open, but, you know, something positive and inspiring for us.
I always, there was a basketball coach that Jim Valvano was his name. I'm a sports fanatic, by the way. I absolutely love sports. It's one of those times in my life where my mind and my body are in unison with one another, which as a trans person is a glorious, glorious feeling, or at least in my case it is. It was like when I'm out doing sports, I'm at peace. But this gentleman was going through a bad spot in life, and his statement was, don't give up. Don't ever give up. And that stuck with me, and that resonates with me to this day. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. But I do want to say one quick thing about occupational therapists. I'm not sure exactly what your profession is, but I think that maybe you all work within the skeletal system of humans also. Like there's like the human body. And I did an interview with a forensic anthropologist, and she pointed out to me something that I think is so important for healthcare professionals to realize. The human body, the actual skeletal system, is on a spectrum also. And that floored me when she was talking about, we have a skeleton here, 5,000 years old. We used to think for sure we knew whether this skeleton was XY or XX. And now we realize we don't have a clue. And everything was just assumptions about that based on current knowledge of what we think is best. So the human skeleton is on the spectrum also. Just like my gender identity is, so is my skeletal system.
Since I didn't mute myself by accident, I'll speak next. I love that fact. When I heard that, I was like, aha, see, no one knows what they're talking about. But maybe it's not an inspirational fact, but I feel like trans people are the most, I guess, sacred and divine and wonderful and necessary people I've encountered. No shade to cis people, but I feel like it's true, we're magical, and I feel like when the world figures out how to treat us, everyone will be all right. So work on that. Yay.
I feel like it's always difficult for me anyways to summarize because I'm rather chatty. I think that affirming someone's identity and supporting their authentic self can be as simple as calling them the name that they have introduced themselves as. I know, especially when I was younger and first telling people about my gender identity, when someone would use the correct pronouns to refer to me, I like glowed. I don't know how obvious it was on the outside, but I was just a little beam of sunshine. So do I think there's a long list of things that needs to be changed? National policies, international policies, local laws. Yes, like there's a huge battle to fight and that we are fighting. And I also think that you can make someone's week. You really can. By using the pronouns they have told you are correct for them. So I kind of want to honor the power of the individual in that.
All right, thank you guys so much for participating in this panel. So we have don't give up, I guess validate the individual experience, Oh, that I had yours really succinct and then it fell out of my head. Oh, everything will be all right. And no shade to cis people. So thank you again. It is much appreciated for you guys to join us in this panel. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.